As more people connected to the Jeffrey Epstein case continue speaking out, new testimony is putting fresh attention on the powerful names that once surrounded him. And with survivors now publicly sharing what they say happened behind closed doors, some online are asking whether people tied to Epstein's circle, including celebrities like Ellen DeGeneres, could be getting nervous about what may still come out next. Some even believe Ghislaine Maxwell may be quietly warning old friends and associates, such as Ellen, especially because there have been new developments that could change everything. At a hearing in Albany, New York, two women publicly spoke for the first time about what they say they experienced with Jeffrey Epstein as teenagers. Both described years of fear, shame, and emotional trauma that they say kept them silent for decades. One of them was Alexandra Golomatis. Standing before the New York State Senate, she introduced herself as a victim and survivor of Jeffrey Epstein's. She said it was the first time she had ever spoken publicly about what happened to her.
My name is Alexandra Golomatis, and I am a victim and survivor of Jeffrey Epstein's abuse. This is the first time I have spoken out publicly. And what happened to me? Thank you to the New York Senate for listening to my story. I grew up in Queens, New York. Growing up, I enjoyed ballet class and playing outside with my friends. I met Epstein when I was a minor. Whew. After I met him, he manipulated, forced, and tricked me into situations I felt I could not refuse. The first time he said me, I was 14 years old. What was going through my head was overwhelming fear, shame, and confusion. He abused me like this for years. Every time was similar, except one time he used my vulnerability against me and began escalating his behavior. Because I was to Epstein, I have suffered deep shame and depression. I have been afraid to come forward because I feared the emotional and mental impact it would have on me. To speak about what I experienced. The Epstein estate has refused to help me because they are arguing that the state of limitations means that what happened to me is worth zero.
Another survivor, Glendy's Espinol, also spoke publicly for the first time that day. She told the Senate she grew up in the Bronx and enjoyed softball, reading, and watching movies with friends and family. She said she first met Epstein during her sophomore year of high school.
My name is Glendy's Espinal, and I am a victim and survivor of Jeffrey Epstein's. This is the very first time I have spoken out publicly or to anyone about what happened to me. Thank you to the New York State Senate for listening to my story. I grew up in the Bronx, New York. Growing up, I enjoyed playing softball, reading, and watching lots of films with my friends and my siblings. I met Epstein when I started my sophomore year in high school. After I met him, he manipulated, forced, tricked me into massaging him. At first, it began as massages, and he would touch and rub areas until I climaxed. And I say that because I would fake it because it was so uncomfortable. What was going through my head at the time was just pure shame, intimidation, and I just could not wait for it all to be over and get out of it. Like this. From 2005 to 2008, I think that every time was similar. Then it started escalating from massages Because I was subject to Epstein, I have suffered till this date from PTSD, extreme anxiety, and depression.
After hearing their testimony, lawmakers praised the women for speaking publicly about such traumatic experiences. One senator told them they had nothing to be ashamed of and called them incredibly brave for coming forward.
Let me start by saying this. You have nothing to be ashamed of. You are incredibly brave. You were the victims. Okay, let's be clear about that. Okay? I can't imagine what you're going through. And I think this, from everyone we've heard from today, I think it answers the very first question I had. In why does it take time? Because it is painful. It is scary. You have those doubts, you have those thoughts, but I'm sure everyone echoes what I'm about to say, and that is you have nothing to be ashamed of.
This reveal, particularly the mention of how these girls were recruited into Epstein's organization, has caused many people to wonder whether we'll see renewed attention turned to Ghislaine Maxwell for her role in the crime, and also just how involved Ellen was in it. And it isn't just these two testimonies that have everyone talking about what could happen. We've also had a journalist by the name of Matthew Steeples recently make some revelations that could completely change the way we look at all of this.
I guess one thing I can ask you to put into words. I mean, I think Loney said that children as young as 8 were taken to the island, or 12. It was a very young age.
The youngest I've heard referenced in the context of Epstein were the twin girls from Paris that Jean-Luc Brunel supposedly gave for his birthday. He was given these twins, and they were taken from some poor parents in some poor part of Paris, I believe, and no one knows what became of those.
They were 12.
They were 7.
7?
Yes. That's right. The youngest reference I've heard.
Would now, is it fair to say that Epstein and Andrew's a separate question? There's two questions. We have to use silly language on YouTube, but PDF files or P files. Epstein,
if you believe somebody called Jay Beecher, and Jay Beecher is somebody who works for effectively the Maxwell family. Mm-hmm. He's been paid £80,000 by a man called Brian Basham, who is their spokesman, for writing a book. Jay Beecher and a lady called Jessica Reed Krause, who's very much one of these MAGA influencers, they have a podcast where they talk about how Jeffrey Epstein was not what you call a PDF. He was actually like Hugh Hefner. And they compare him to Hugh Hefner, and he just liked, a bit of fun and young girls. And I think that is absolutely reprehensible and wrong, and it's proven to be wrong, because why have these people been paid out? You don't pay to someone you didn't do something to, and that's what everybody has said of Andrew all along. Why was £12 million or whatever sum it was paid? Yep. And again, what we need now to know, and it must come out, is what was the sum actually paid?
The intersection of celebrity culture and the American criminal justice system has always been a subject of intense public fascination, but rarely has a case emerged that is as chilling or as high stakes as the one currently surrounding David Burke. Known to millions of fans worldwide as the rising music sensation D4VD, the 21-year-old artist now finds himself at the center of a legal maelstrom that threatens to end his career and his freedom permanently. In a startling turn of events, Burke has been officially charged with first-degree murder in connection with the tragic death of 14-year-old Celeste Rivas Hernandez. The gravity of the situation is further amplified by the decision of prosecutors to pursue special circumstances, legal triggers that, under California law, could potentially lead to the death penalty if a conviction is secured. This development has sent shockwaves through the music industry, transforming a story of artistic success into a grim, cautionary tale of power and its alleged abuse. The public's introduction to this legal nightmare began with a dramatic show of force in one of Los Angeles's most exclusive enclaves. High-definition video footage released by regional news outlets captured the moment heavily armed tactical units surrounded a luxury estate in the Hollywood Hills. The contrast was stark. the serene, sun-drenched beauty of the hills was shattered. By the presence of officers in full tactical gear, their weapons drawn as they secured the perimeter of Burke's residence. The singer was eventually seen being led from the property in handcuffs, his face obscured as he was escorted into a waiting patrol vehicle. This was not a sudden impulse by law enforcement. Reports indicate that detectives had been meticulously building their case against Burke for several months, tracking his movements and digital footprint long before the first warrant was ever served. The catalyst for this nationwide headline was a discovery of such profound horror that it immediately redefined the parameters of the investigation. It began at a Los Angeles tow yard, a mundane setting for a grisly revelation. Workers at the facility had reported a pervasive, sickening odor emanating from a Tesla that had been abandoned and subsequently impounded. When authorities arrived to inspect the vehicle, which was eventually linked back to Burke, they opened the front trunk to find the decomposing remains of Celeste Rivas Hernandez. The teenage girl had been the subject of a desperate missing persons search for months, but the reality of her fate was far worse than the community had feared. The discovery of her body in a vehicle associated with a high-profile celebrity instantly turned the case into a flashpoint for media scrutiny and public outrage. As forensic teams began the arduous task of identifying the remains, the details of Celeste's final months began to emerge, painting a picture of systemic neglect and violence. Authorities confirmed that the remains belonged to the missing teenager, noting that she had sustained severe injuries prior to her death. Perhaps the most disturbing evidence presented by the prosecution involved the radical physical change Celeste underwent during her disappearance. When she was last seen alive, she was a healthy teenager weighing approximately 130 pounds. However, by the time her remains were recovered from the Tesla, her weight had plummeted to a mere 70 pounds. The autopsy further revealed that the remains were not intact, suggesting a level of post-mortem trauma that investigators classified as a deliberate attempt to obstruct the identification of the victim or the cause of death. The investigation quickly shifted from the recovery of the body to the nature of the relationship between the rising star and the teenage girl. Prosecutors have alleged that Burke was involved in an illicit and predatory relationship with Celeste, beginning while she was still under the age of 14. In the state of California, the law is absolute regarding the age of consent. Any sexual interaction involving a child under 14 is a felony, regardless of the circumstances. Authorities claim to have uncovered a digital trail of messages and location data that suggests continuous contact over an extended period. This alleged relationship is now being framed by the district attorney's office as the primary motive for the murder. The theory presented to the court is that as Celeste became more of a liability to Burke's carefully curated public image, he allegedly turned to violence to ensure her silence. In the days following the recovery of the remains, the Hollywood Hills mansion became the epicenter of a massive forensic search. Neighbors, who had previously viewed the property as just another celebrity residence, began providing crucial testimony to detectives. Several residents claimed to have seen the specific Tesla involved in the case parked at Burke's home for weeks before it was mysteriously abandoned and towed. Inside the mansion, the search was exhaustive. Investigators seized a staggering array of electronic equipment, including high-end servers, external hard drives, and mobile devices. This digital haul reportedly yielded over 40 terabytes of data, which forensic analysts are now sifting through. Among the findings, prosecutors allege they discovered hundreds of hours of illegal content involving minors, some of which they believe directly features the victim, Celeste Rivas Hernandez. The legal complexity of the case grew as Los Angeles County District Attorney Nathan Hochman announced a litany of charges that reflect the severity of the allegations. Beyond the count of first-degree murder, Burke faces charges of mutilation of human remains, continuous unlawful acts involving a child, and the murder of a potential witness. The special circumstances attached to the murder charge are particularly significant. They suggest that the killing was committed during the commission of another felony or involved exceptional brutality. These enhancements are what allow the state to seek life without the possibility of parole or the ultimate penalty of death. While Burke's defense team continues to maintain his total innocence, asserting that the evidence is circumstantial and that their client is being unfairly targeted due to his fame, the prosecution is signaling a long and aggressive trial. The forensic details released by the medical examiner nearly a year after the discovery have only added to the grim narrative. The autopsy confirmed that Celeste died from multiple penetrating injuries and that her death was a clear homicide. The report detailed extensive trauma and dismemberment, which investigators believe occurred both before and after death. Although the advanced state of decomposition made it difficult to pinpoint every specific detail with absolute certainty, the evidence of a violent struggle and premeditated intent was sufficient for the district attorney to move forward. Prosecutors have described the crime as especially horrific, a term used to justify the pursuit of the most severe punishments available under the American legal system. The digital evidence remains one of the most contentious aspects of the pre-trial proceedings. With 40 terabytes of data to process, the defense has argued for extensive delays to conduct their own forensic analysis. This cache of data includes not only personal communications, but also surveillance footage from the Hollywood Hills property and financial records. Interestingly, online sleuths and independent commentators have begun dissecting Burke's unreleased music and past interviews for potential confessions. One particular unreleased track, which leaked shortly after the arrest, contains lyrics regarding a relationship that had to vanish to save a career. While the defense argues that lyrics are artistic fiction and protected speech, the prosecution may seek to introduce them as evidence of Burke's state of mind and intent in the months leading up to Celeste's disappearance. As the case moves toward a jury trial, the personal life of the Burke family has also come under the microscope. Reports indicate that in the weeks preceding his arrest, David Burke transferred the ownership of 2 high-value properties into his mother's name. Prosecutors view this as an attempt to shield assets from potential civil litigation or government seizure. Furthermore, the singer's parents have faced legal pressure of their own as they reportedly resisted subpoenas to testify before a grand jury. Their defense argued that the subpoenas lacked sufficient specificity, leading to a series of appeals that have added layers of procedural delay to an already complicated case. These maneuvers suggest a family and a legal team that is bracing for a multi-year battle in the courts. Currently, Burke is being held in a high-security segregated unit within the Los Angeles County jail system. His status as a high-profile defendant accused of crimes against a minor has made him a target for threats, necessitating his isolation from the general inmate population. Reports from within the facility suggest that his daily life is a far cry from the luxury he once knew. He is afforded only a few hours of recreation per week and is under constant surveillance. This period of incarceration is just the beginning of what is expected to be a long road through the judicial system. As the world watches, the core of the American legal philosophy that a defendant is presumed innocent until proven guilty will be tested against a mountain of disturbing allegations and forensic evidence. The trial of David Burke promises to be a defining moment in the intersection of celebrity influence and the pursuit of justice.
Publicist in Britain who worked with a lot of these people, represented by the same lawyers as Mandelson, for example, Mishcon Dure. With Clifford, it was the size of his anatomy. All the victims said it was very small.
Is that right? I didn't know that about
that. Was a consistent theme with victims of Max Clifford, and that was one of the main reasons he was convicted.
Wow.
And with Epstein, he had very deformed parts of his body, supposedly.
Really? I didn't know that either.
There's a lot of discussion there. And I think, given his activities, I would probably say he was probably a little bit like Mugabe. He probably suffered with all sorts of sexual diseases. When you are as prolific as that kind of activity, you are more susceptible to suffering such illness.
The conversation also interestingly turned toward Prince Andrew and the reported settlement involving Virginia Jew.
The British public are starting to say, was it the taxpayer paying this, or was it the Queen, or was it King Charles, or was it a combination of all of it? And where did it actually go, and what did Virginia actually get? Because the charity Virginia was involved with doesn't appear to have, nothing seems to have occurred with that. So the trail of that money is also very curious. But coming back to these victims, the victims I know have been paid money. And they were settled. And a lot of the settlements were made by banks, because these banks would rather just pay a bill and know how to get rid of the negative publicity. So, of course, there are people who now come out of the woodwork who are fake. So you get a lot of people who will be making things up saying, I was a victim. You get that in any kind of situation of this type. But so many of them tell consistent stories of things that happened. And
in fact, the Virginia news has caused so much uproar because previously unseen footage is now surfacing that could end up connecting Ellen to none other than Ghislaine Maxwell. In the clip, Ghislaine can be heard saying she did not believe Epstein died by...
I do not believe he died by suicide.
And do you believe that, do you have any speculation or view of who killed him?
No, I don't.
That means he had powerful collaborators. That statement has fueled years of speculation online from people who believe Epstein may have been silenced because of what he knew about wealthy and influential figures.
Start with Jeffrey Epstein, because the way you have written about him, it connects to a whole world of corruption.
Yeah.
Is he kind of the Rosetta Stone?
Yeah, I think it's sort of like a meta scandal. You're looking at someone who really had, I guess, for lack of a better metaphor, had his hands in a lot of pies, right?
Yeah, right.
So he was sort of at the center of a lot of scandals, but not necessarily at the top, right? I think he was more maybe middle management in a sense, but very central to a lot of these things going on, that sort of these networks in which he inhabits are involved in, numerous acts of corruption simultaneously.
Yeah.
And he, is there involved in many of them, but not necessarily at the top level, right?
So was he a spy?
I think he definitely had intelligence connections, and there's a lot, to suggest that was the case. I think one of the earliest hints we heard of that was having a Secretary of Labor, Alex Acosta, under Trump, say that one of the reasons he was pressured into giving Epstein a sweetheart deal during his first arrest in Florida was because he had been told by unspecified actors that Epstein belonged to intelligence. But that's kind of, what exactly does that mean? Was he an asset? Was he on the payroll? Which intelligence agency? Multiple intelligence agencies?
Right.
When you have his close association with someone like Ghislaine Maxwell in the mix, and her father had affiliations with numerous intelligence agencies, it really is an open question.
He was kind of a bad guy. I'm reading your work about him, and explain who he was.
So Robert Maxwell was involved in many things, but he definitely played a major role in undermining U.S. national security by selling bug software to nuclear laboratories in the United States. And this was directly facilitated by well-known statesmen in U.S. history, like Henry Kissinger, for example. And a lot of the people, I think, that enabled him, at least on the U.S. side, tend to be those that favor global governance, and they kind of don't want the U.S. to have that kind of monopoly on power.
One name repeatedly pulled into these online conversations is Ellen DeGeneres. People have pointed to the timing of Ellen ending her talk show, her move overseas, and the public backlash she faced over workplace allegations as reasons some internet. Investigators continue speculating about possible deeper connections.
Look at it.
Oh, well, you know where that is too, right? The similar image to that, right?
No.
I know Jamie does.
What is it?
It's on the set of a famous talk show that's now not on anymore.
Oh, Ellen? Was that Ellen?
Yeah.
Really?
But just look at the temple, and then look at the...
Let me see Ellen's background. What?